All right, Chapter 17. 17 is Communication and Documentation. This is a chapter that contains information that we use every day in EMS. Some of the chapters that we'll get to later in the book, you might see that occasionally in your career in EMS, maybe depending on how busy your service is, maybe once or twice a week, once or twice a month, once or twice a year. But communication and documentation is something we have to do every single time we have anything to do with EMS. This and your ambulance stretcher tends to be, and your assessment tend to be the most commonly used tools in EMS. So obviously communication is huge because of the systems that we play in. If this was a solo job that we didn't interact with anybody else, including patients, obviously communication would be not quite as important. And then documentation, of course, is quite important as well. Communications covers everything, including written and verbal communication. The documentation specifically tends to imply the responsibilities for making a permanent written record. So when we are talking about our roles in EMS, oftentimes we have a very limited amount of time with our patients and then a very limited amount of time with our what we'll call them peers, whether they're the people that are on the truck with us, first responders, firefighters, whatnot, other healthcare providers. But what we do has that lasting impression, and there will be times in which you'll be asked to go back and review your performance from years ago, and if you don't have a well-documented call, a good patient care report, you may have nothing to stand on. There are a couple of multimedia slides for you to look at, some effective communication items, communicating with children, and cultural perspectives. I would recommend that you obviously take a look at all of those. Cultural perspectives is kind of a unique idea here. One of the things you need to keep in mind is culturally things are different. We tend to be ethnocentric here in the United States. We are concerned with our own culture. We don't tend to pay much attention to other cultures. And sometimes that actually gets us into trouble. Keep in mind that, say, some of the Asian cultures will, it is a sign of disrespect to look somebody straight in the eye, which in the United States that tends to be the standard. So it'd be a good idea to take a look at those videos. So our core concepts for this chapter include talking about radio procedures for our various stages, delivery and format of the radio report to the hospital, as well as a verbal handoff report to the hospital. These are not the same thing. Communication skills used when interacting with other members of the healthcare team, and communication skills used when interacting with the patient, as well as components and procedures for your written pre-hospital report, any particular legal aspects and benefits of documentation, and then some concerns for patient refusal as well as special reporting situations. So communication systems and radio communication. EMS systems vary greatly in what they use for their communication systems. It wasn't all that long ago, of course EMS is not very old, if you recall, that you had to listen for the town whistle or the town bell to know that there was a call. And that was the way that they signaled people in the community that help was needed. The next generation beyond that became what was known as the fire phones and the plectrons. Fire phones were phones that were installed in people's houses or in common businesses in the community. It was a special phone that sat on the wall, and when it rang, people would go answer that phone, would get the information of the call, and then could then respond to the scene or the station. Plectrons were like a giant pager that were about the size of a larger lunchbox that would have to sit in one spot. They didn't have a battery, had to remain plugged into the wall. Power went out, you were in trouble. But the plectron basically was a big pager. It was one-way communication. It would go off much like, say, a weather radio does in your house now if you have one of those, that it alerts you to something that's going on, and that was it. This day and age, we tend to use a combination of radios, one-way pagers. There are some two-way pagers out there, cell phones, and traditional telephones or landlines. Landlines tend to get used less and less these days with the advent of the cell phone. Now that a majority of people in the United States have a cell phone and do not have a landline, we're probably going to see even less and less of those. Radios can be anything from the ones that you have mounted in a particular location to one you carry on your hip. Cell phones in these days, people are able to get pages on their cell phones, and even with certain apps can respond back to them. There's a system called I Am Responding, which if you get the text of the call on your phone, you can hit one button basically, and it sends a message back to the system, and it will say that you are on your way to the station. And when you have a system like this, it helps alleviate a little bit of that stress when you have one or two people sitting at the station waiting for another person to come along so the squad can go out the door. So when we talk about radios, a couple of different types of radios that we deal with. We have base stations, mobiles, and portables. A base station is one that's in a fixed location. Tend to think of the ones either in our station, in the dispatch center, or at a hospital being base stations. They typically are higher powered radios, maybe 100 watts or so, that can be heard throughout several counties, it tends to be. And base stations don't have to be mobile because we're usually the ones that are going to those locations, or there's no need for them to be moved. Mobile radios are the ones that you find mounted in your vehicles, such as your fire trucks, ambulances, police cars. You may have one in your personal vehicle, depending on your setup of your department. Mobile radios tend to have about 20 to 50 watts of power, can be heard roughly the majority of most counties. If you're talking a larger county, say like Potawatomi or Kasuth County, you're not going to get probably quite that much carry unless you have a newer style 800 or 900 megahertz radio. Then you might have a little bit more power in the way that you set it up with repeaters and whatnot. So mobiles are what you're typically going to talk to dispatch on when you're in your ambulance calls. Portable radios are the ones that people carry on their hips, a lot of times called a walkie-talkie. And a portable radio tends to have about 2 to 5 watts of power, probably going to get about 2 to 5 miles worth of range on that. Some places will have them for people that are the on-duty working crew or the officers of the service. I used to, when I was working 911, had a portable radio assigned to me because we had a lot of on-call time. So if we would get a call back, we could respond on our radio, say I'm on my way to the hospital or what have you. Repeaters. Repeaters are a system in which picks up a signal, a weaker signal, boosts it, and then retransmits it. And I think the next slide kind of shows that pretty well. Things such as microwave transmissions and digital radio transmissions. Digital systems tend to be what we're using now. There's not. It's a better system. It is a much more expensive system, unfortunately. Microwave has a lot to do with certain types of radio transmission. Of course, cell phones get used a lot as well. So digital radio signals are typical in the larger metro community systems where they're talking on 800 and 900 megahertz radios. Significantly more expensive systems to set up, but generally more reliable. So here's an example of a repeater system. And a repeater system, you could be on your portable radio, you key up your portable radio, and it will go to a tower. It will be picked up by that tower. It pulls the radio signal in, boosts it back up, and then just retransmits it back out. So the signals can be broadcast as far as they really need to be, depending on how the system is set up. We are able to, say in the state of Iowa, at least they used to be able to have somebody in Council Bluffs key up the radio and be able to talk to somebody in Davenport just through a system of repeaters, and it would bounce from tower to tower to tower. The advantages of repeaters might be a little more realistic to somebody when you talk about a vehicle repeater. You can put a small repeater in a vehicle. When you talk on your walkie-talkie or your portable, it actually goes out, hits the radio in your truck, and then your truck radio, which has 10 times the power that your portable radio does, retransmits it. And so that might be another opportunity for the use of repeaters to build a system. The radio communication regulation is all done by the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC. They will assign licenses to designated radio frequencies. Examples might be in Iowa, most systems use 155.340 as their EMS channel. It's pretty common, particularly in the rural areas, that that frequency would be used. Most ambulances will have that, as well as hospitals will have that as well. They will establish rules regarding appropriate language, no profanity, and then they monitor radio traffic just to make sure people are in compliance. And this is actually a good thing, because from time to time they do find people who are civilians who just happen to get their hands on some radio equipment, and they're using it for their own personal gain and operating on an EMS frequency. I mean, typically that would get reported, but occasionally it's also found by the FCC. So a couple of principles of radio communication. Is your radio on, and is the volume adjusted properly? That can be very subjective depending on the system you're in. Some of them, the battery switch, if you have an older unit that has a battery switch, turns on your radio. Sometimes you have to turn the key. Sometimes it remains hot the entire time unless you power it on or power it off. So you're going to have to know your own equipment. It's a lot like car stereos that all has the same functionality. It's just a matter of where's the right switch to do this. So knowing your equipment before you have to use it is a good idea. Make sure that your volume is adjusted properly. Reduce any background noise. So if you're rocking out, going down the road with the stereo blasting on your way to a call, make sure and turn that off before you talk on the radio. If you're rolling down the highway at 65 miles an hour with the windows down, you might want to roll those up. Ensure the frequency is clear before starting. If the frequency is used by multiple agencies, let's say maybe you're in a county that has 10 or 12 different EMS agencies that all potentially are going to be in various stages of their calls if they're on calls. Remember, you got to share that frequency. Make sure it's clear before you start. Don't walk over the top of somebody else. Press your press to talk button or your PTT and wait about 1 second before speaking. It takes a moment for the radio to activate when you press that button, and by pressing the press to talk button and starting to talk right away, you can cut off a lot of your message before it ever even gets transmitted. All right, principles of radio communication. Put your lips about 2 to 3 inches from the microphone. Use your unit name and number depending on how your system is set up and designed. There are no real hard and fast rules here because each system operates a little differently. call that unit's attention first and then wait for the go-ahead. Usually dispatch will tell you. Understand that dispatch has a lot of things going on, so you may get a standby. They just may need you to stand by for a moment until they clear things up. If you're talking to metro area, you probably have 5 or 6 people in a room that are working on taking calls, dispatching calls, recording information, so on and so forth. If you're talking a rural county, you may have, at midnight, you may have one person who's taking all the calls, dispatching all the calls, handling all the radio traffic on multiple frequencies, answering multiple lines. They may have to deal with the street department as well, or animal control, listening for the highway patrol or the state patrol. They may have to run warrant searches, and they may have some jailer duties. So understand that the other end of the line in the dispatch center is not always a nice, easy job. It's kind of like ours. Sometimes when it hits the fan, it hits the fan, and there's only so much one person can handle at one time. Speak slowly and clearly. Keep your messages very brief. Avoid codes. Use plain English. Remember, codes are not particularly standardized. Things like 10-4 are pretty standard. People worldwide know what that means. But one of the things they identified in 9/11 response was codes from different areas don't always mean the same thing. Take, for example, when we say code 1 and code 3 here in the Iowa-Nebraska area, that tends to mean code 1 is relatively minor and code 3 tends to be life-threatening. However, code 1 in other areas of the United States, or even other areas of the Midwest here, code 1 means life-threatening. So they're not standardized. 1045 in Nebraska is a personal injury collision, and in Iowa is an animal carcass in the road. So it doesn't always mean the same. Avoid your unnecessary words. Don't clutter it. You don't need to make it big, pretty, and flowery. Just try to get the basic point across and move on. Things like be advised, pleases, and thank yous. A lot of those things are assumed. You don't need them. Leave them out. Say what you got to say. Get off the radio. Somebody else needs to use it. If a number can be unclear, say the number and then repeat the individual digits. So maybe you want to say that the patient's pulse is 60. You would say the patient's pulse is 60, 60. That would help clarify that. Help people think, oh, was it 60 or 16? So never use a patient's name over the radio. If you're talking on your cell phone, you may use it depending on how your system sets up. No profanity or slander over the radio. And then use of objective, impartial statements. You want to get the things you can find, see, and the things the patients are telling you, get them said, get them out if they're necessary, and move on. Not everything is necessary. Use we instead of I. It's a team approach, not you by yourself. They tend to encourage affirmative and negative over yes and no. Yes and no are short words and can be easily misconstrued, whereas affirmative and negative tend to be pretty hard to confuse. Give your assessment information about your patient. Avoid offering a formal diagnosis. If you kind of have an idea of what you're treating the patient off of, what treatment protocol you're going off of, you can kind of lend a little of that to your radio report. Transmit after you're done transmitting. Say over. This is not big here, particularly in the Midwest and the Plains states. Over doesn't get used. It's not like some of the movies you see. We don't tend to use over very often. Avoid the use of slang or unauthorized abbreviations. In EMS, we have our own little language, just like healthcare has its own little language, and we don't. People don't often know what we're talking about. So if we are talking about a KED or we're talking about a king or something like that, which to us makes sense, other healthcare professionals may not have any idea what that even is. So try to avoid using specific jargon. and then use your EMS frequencies for authorized EMS communication only. You may have a secondary or backup frequency that you guys use kind of as your, some departments will refer to it as fireground, or other places will call it their off link, their off channel, where it's really more communication back and forth between the specific trucks, and it doesn't always involve the dispatcher. If two units are trying to transmit simultaneously, at best only one will be heard by the listener. Yeah, you need to keep in mind that if two units are trying to transmit, the dispatcher probably is not getting any of it, or the hospital or whoever else needs to get that. So take just a moment, listen up for half a second before you start to transmit. Dispatch often confirms the receipt of your information by repeating part of it back to you. So you might say Medic 1's on location, and then dispatch might come back with repeating what you said plus the time. So it might be Medic 1 on location at 10:47. So if you have to leave the truck, make sure you take whatever portable communication device you have, whether it's a pager or portable. And then remember, your radios need proper care and maintenance. They're probably a little more sturdy than most of your smartphones are. They don't tend to have a big piece of awesome glass on it for you to break every 5 seconds. But radios are delicate instruments. They're easy to break. You break little clips on them. You break buttons off of them or antennas off of them. And they're not typically submergible. If they go underwater, typically that radio just got fried. So you got to be careful. Batteries are another big thing. Just like our cell phones, we're worried about battery life from time to time. Being diligent in the way that you care for your radio's batteries, letting them run down when necessary, and then be recharged up. Depending on the different types of batteries you're talking, you can extend your battery life for a fairly good amount of time. So if we're going to give a medical radio report, that report needs to be given to the destination hospital so it can prepare for your arrival. So usually this is done via the radio. However, more and more they are tending to be done over the phone. It's a little bit more private that way. We don't have as much scanning going on there. It's structured to present only the most important information. You need to make sure you speak clearly and slowly. When we talk about important information, it is truly, there's just a couple of 11, 12 things here that are important parts of your medical report. Here's the reality of it. That person on the other end that's getting your radio report, they want to know kind of what you're bringing in, how soon are you going to be there, and how critical is this deal. That's, in all honesty, what they want to know. They really, in most cases, don't care much about the rest of what your radio report is. So keep it short, keep it concise. So you identify your unit, level of provider if that's your system. A lot of times it's understood that that's an EMT service or that's a paramedic service. Your ETA, or your estimated time of arrival, the patient's age and sex, their chief complaint, a brief, pertinent history of the present illness. So it might be something as has been sick for a few days, has suffered a car crash 10 minutes ago, any major pertinent past illnesses. So if you're bringing in a patient with a broken ankle, there are very few pertinent major past medical histories that need to be relayed in. This is kind of an isolated incident. The mental status, the patient's vital signs, pertinent physical findings. So that may include an occasional pertinent negative as well. Specific emergency care that you guys provided, any response to the medical care if they feel better, feel worse, and then, if needed, medical direction. They may have questions for you. They may have some orders for you. So if you're going to communicate then with medical control, you give your information clearly and accurately, and after receiving an order or a denial for a medication or procedure, repeat back that order word for word. If the order is unclear, ask the physician or the nurse to repeat it. This repeat back echo effect that you have going on here is a way to help reduce medical error, and that's why we kind of go back and forth that way. If an order seems inappropriate, question it. It's okay. Even though you're not a physician, even physicians occasionally make mistakes as well. So if you have been ordered to give your chest pain patient 81 tablets of aspirin, you may want to say 81 tablets or 81 milligrams, and understand that the physician is probably trying to formulate something in their mind, trying to figure out what's going on as well, and it's very possible that they could misspeak. All right, so your verbal handoff report. After you've given the very brief Cliff Notes version to the hospital over the radio or the phone, you're going to get there to transfer care of your patient. This is really you helping them have continued care. So when the nurses are going to now take over, the doctor's going to take over, the other allied health is going to take over, they need a lot of the information that you gathered and things that you did. Yes, they may repeat some of it, but let's say the patient goes unconscious as soon as you walk in the door. There's no way for them to repeat a lot of that. So your detailed report can be the only information they may get. Introduce your patient by name. Use the appropriate title as necessary if it's a Mr. or Mrs. Give a complete and detailed report of what happened. Now is the time in which you can kind of get into the skinny of what's going on. So you tell them, your trends of your vital signs. You can give them that full medical history, the meds, the allergies, and so on and so forth. So the additional elements here: chief complaint, history of the present illness. This can be the detailed version of it. Any of your assessment findings, including your pertinent negatives. Treatment given in response, complete vital signs and the trending that you saw. So if they continued to elevate or decrease, that's appropriate for that verbal report. The video on effective communication. Interpersonal communication. This is communicating with your team. So the EMT has to communicate with a lot of people. This is the other first responders, whether it's law enforcement or fire, advanced EMTs and paramedics, the home health care, nursing home nurses, maybe it's the physician at a physician's clinic or office, so family members, of course, and the patient. It all is part of the healthcare team. People just have different roles in what they fulfill. So speak candidly and respectfully and collect the important information about your patient. Therapeutic communication. This is generally those that we use with our patient. The communication techniques can be learned by experience. They can be more difficult for those in crisis because people are concentrating on their hurts or their illnesses, and they are not as concerned with being concise with what information they're giving to you. Everybody can improve their communication skills. Gentlemen probably have heard that from time to time from your counterparts that you never communicate with me. Well, communication in this setting is critical, and it can be difficult because we've got a lot going on. We have lots of information we have to collect. We have lots of skills and tasks we need to perform, but we need to make sure that we keep the patient in the loop. So some communication techniques: use eye contact, although understanding that occasionally it may be a cultural taboo. But it shows interest, comfort, and respect. Get down to their face level. Sometimes you're kneeling down on the floor. Sometimes you're sitting down next to them, or maybe even laying on the floor. Face the patient. Keep your arms down. Be aware of your body language. I have a bad habit of just crossing my arms in front of me, and it's just something that I've done because it's I don't know if it's a nervous habit or what, but understanding that appearance, that stance can relay a message of I'm really not interested in what you have to say. It can be very standoffish, and that can alter the patient's perception. So use your appropriate language. Ensure that the patient understands the language. Don't be using a lot of technical jargon. Remember, the technical jargon can be confusing to other healthcare professionals. It's certainly going to be hard for patients to understand it. Now, you may use an occasional medical term to help clarify. The patient might tell you that they have an irregular heartbeat, and so with that you might say, does the term atrial fibrillation sound familiar to you? Yeah, I have atrial fibrillation. They probably don't quite remember all of the language, but if you say some of these things, it can be helpful. And be honest. Dishonesty ruins confidence and rapport. If somebody asks you, is this going to hurt, you probably need to tell them, yes, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt, but just for a moment. Use the patient's proper name. Tend to use the Mrs. and Mrs. or Ms., particularly with patients that are older than yourself. That's a sign of respect. They may tell you, may ask them, okay, Mr. So-and-so, and they may tell you, call me Earl, or call me, by their first name. And with those patients, you can do that, but you should try to start out with the respectful version of it. Listen. It's important to establish trust. Active listening is huge. The patient gives you some information. You can repeat back a little of that. Use some of their wording to clarify, and that lets them know you are truly listening. When you're listening, you should be doing nothing but listening, or maybe jotting a quick note. If you're trying to already formulate your next question, you're not truly listening to what they have to say. Other special considerations in communication. Always be compassionate and respectful. We have people with disabilities. We have language barriers. We have pediatric patients. With those people, try to understand that they may not truly get what we're talking about here, but they will feel the compassion and the respect, even if they don't understand completely what you're saying. Another video. So your pre-hospital care report. This is a document, your PCR, written document of everything that happened during the call. There's lots of different forms of this, whether it's the handwritten on paper, a laptop, or an electronic tablet. Some of them are web-based from a computer terminal. This day and age, the electronic versions of the PCR tend to be the most prevalent. It is much easier to gather data from that, transmit that data, store the data without having to have tons and tons and tons of file cabinets to store these documents in. So electronic tends to be, and it will only continue to get bigger. There are rules on the books in most states now that are shifting towards required electronic data reporting. So the functions of your patient care report, it's to document the findings and the treatments. This is going to paint the picture of what happened. We're the only ones that really get to see the scene, so it's our document that has to paint the picture for everybody in the hospital. It will become a part of their permanent medical record. So what we do on our reports goes in their permanent file, so at that hospital. So your PCR can be referred to weeks and months down the road when they're continuing the treatment of this patient. Maybe the patient's now in therapy and they want to go back and find out specifics. Your PCR is there. A lot of times now with the electronic systems, the moment that you submit your patient care report, It goes either to their electronic medical record in their computer database, or it may be electronically transmitted to, say, a fax or a printer, so they have a hard copy of it right in front of them in the ER so they can refer to it. It is a legal document. It can be subpoenaed and used as evidence either for or against you. It can help the patient win a case. It can help the state win a case. It can be used against you if they're trying to sue you for negligence. So this is why it behooves you to write a full and complete report. The times that I've had to go to court in EMS, luckily I've never had to defend myself. It's always been a state's witness. Those times that I've had to do that, I've had to rely on my report, and that a lot of times has been 2, 3, or 4 years since the incident even occurred. One of the times the incident was a very high-profile incident, so I remembered quite a bit about it. The other 2 times, I guess, that I had to go and give testimony, they were not terribly high profile cases, so I had really kind of forgotten about them until I had gotten notification that there was this pending lawsuit. And in most cases, it's one party suing another party because somebody didn't scoop snow or there's a car crash or whatever, and they're just trying to support their case with your information. There are some administrative functions of our PCRs. The patient's demographic information can be found there. Their insurance information and their billing address. These are things that we are potentially going to need down the road. If your service doesn't charge for their services, they should be. It costs money to operate that, and most services anymore are charging at least something to help offset some of that cost. It is not cheap to be in the EMS business. Education and research. We have clinical research that will take some of the statistics from your reports. Continuing education can be driven off of this, and it might be something that when National Registry decides, hey, we're going to take a look at a cross-section of patient care reports from the nation. Of course, it'll be the specific identifying information may be removed. But they're going to say, what are we seeing? What is the trends out there? What do we need to concentrate our Con Ed programs on? It can be used for quality improvement, routine call review. Your medical director is responsible for reviewing X amount of your calls that your service goes on. It helps ensure compliance with certain standards. Did you follow the protocol? Did you take them to the right facility based off of our procedures? It can reveal providers deserving either special recognition or some opportunities for improvement. Maybe they notice that somebody at the advanced level, somebody's IV skills are terrible. They only get 10% of the IVs they try, and that can be an opportunity then that they can say, let's go back and do some training on this. Let's go back and look at this and see what we can do to improve. So there are certain elements of your PCR. You have run data, which is going to be specific information about where was the call, and then other specifics that may apply to the scene itself, and then the drop-off. I'll have some demographics for your service, the service name, the level, maybe the unit number, the personnel that were on it, certifications, etc. Official times usually will be given by dispatch, so that all the times will match. So we're not using Joe's watch to see what time we're on the scene, and Bill's watch to see what time we left the scene, and my watch to see what time we got to the hospital, because we may be off by a few minutes here or there. Patient information, the name and address, phone number, gender, age, weight. So a lot of specific demographics of that patient. So some of these things can be very important, such as gender, age, weight, race, or ethnicity. That stuff all can play parts of determining what's going on with this person medically. You have the information that you gathered during the call. Somewhere on there should be a general impression. A narrative. We'll talk about narrative here in a little bit, but that's really kind of the written story. The history and treatment of the patient, and then the transport information. Where did you go to, and in which manner? So the narrative, there are different ways to write this. Some people like what's referred to as a chronological, where they basically start from the beginning of the story and they just write straight through. Other times, patients will use providers will use specific formats, something called the SOAP method or the chart method, that will talk about the subjective information, objective information, assessment information, plan, history, so on and so forth. So remember, objective and subjective. Objective are things that you can see. Subjective are things that you have to get from the patient. Also, it can be open to interpretation. So also in your narrative, you should have your chief complaint. So what is that patient complaining of? And it's best recorded as a direct quote. Putting quotes around it means the patient actually said this. Pertinent negatives are very important to put in there, because in the check boxes, maybe it doesn't say the patient had shortness of breath, but it would be typical for a certain medical patient to have shortness of breath. If that's the case, you would put in your narrative, patient denies complaint of shortness of breath. Plain English and approved abbreviations. Again, try to avoid codes. Certain things have no meaning to anybody else besides us. Make sure it is legible. The spelling and grammar are correct. This is a big deal. If you would get called to court and there's all kinds of misspellings and poor grammar in there, they're going to rip you apart on the stands. That information has to be able to be read, and that PCR is a reflection of your care. They're going to say, well, you didn't care enough to write a good patient care report, so how do we know that your patient care actually was any good? Appropriate medical terminology. Know what the word means before you use it. Don't use it because it sounds cool and you think you know what it is. And until you've looked it up and you know for sure that that's what that word means, you should probably not use it. And if it happened, record it. There's also a rule in documentation and charting. If it wasn't written, it wasn't done. So keep that in mind. If you did something, you better have it documented in one way, shape, or form on that report. Otherwise, that lawyer that's trying to sue you for their personal injury lawsuit is going to rip you apart because it wasn't there. Another video on cultural perspectives. Special information. Confidentiality. Obviously, a lot of this is covered by HIPAA, which is that Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It really is concerned a lot with our accountability and security of our information. But if you have documents that pertain to the patient, you cannot leave them lay around. They need to be secured until you're done with your report. So don't let them just lay on the counter or on the desk. You got to keep it confidential. Once that report is on file, a lot of times providers can't go back to it and get it without having special permission. Refusals, these are huge liability issues. Document all the details in a refusal of care form. Gain as much information about this patient as you can before you allow them to sign off. Falsification. This is covering up any errors. If you did something wrong, or you didn't do something you should have, or you did something you shouldn't have, you got to record something that you have to make record. Sometimes it's appropriate right in the patient care report. Sometimes there are other methods to doing that. There are usually ways to amend a patient care report, and it will allow you to go in and add to your narrative. It will usually mark it as was added after the fact. And then correction of errors. If you make a mistake in your documentation, if you're handwriting this, the correct way to correct an error is one line through whatever the error is, and you initial and date and time when you did that. Don't scratch it out. Don't try to blot it completely out so it's unreadable. That looks like you're trying to cover up something. And then again, like I said, additions usually can be added. You should date and time those and sign those as well when you make those additions. So think about it. Respond to a call for unconscious male. Upon arrival, the patient's awake, alert, and walking away. States he was just sleeping and he does not need or want his treatment or transport. So things to think about. Is this a patient? Well, it may or may not be a patient. We don't know. We need to talk to the patient to try to find out, is he within his right mind? Maybe we need to ask him some questions to find out, is he truly capable of making this decision? Is a complete assessment and physical exam needed? If he'll allow us to do it, we should probably do it. And we may just tell him, hey, we just want to make sure you're okay. Can we give you a quick once-over, and if everything turns out, we'll let you sign off and we'll get out of your hair. How are you going to document this call? You need to make sure that you hang a lot of paper on this, because if something happens and this guy walks down the street, has a heart attack, and dies, somebody's going to come asking you, why didn't you take this guy to the hospital? And should you obtain a formal patient refusal? If you can, absolutely. Release yourself from the liability whenever possible. A couple other special situation, mass casualty incident. We have all these patients. We can't do the standard report that we would do for everybody. It can't be as detailed. We switch from the mode of trying to be a problem solver for one or two patients and switching to a status of, we need to get these people assessed and then transported to somewhere where there's more hands that can help us do everything that we need to do. So your reporting is going to be much less per person, however, obviously going to be much more because of the sheer volume. Other things, these don't always necessarily go directly into the patient care report, but would be times that you would need to fill out maybe other reports. If you are injured or exposed to something, there's a hazardous or unsafe scene, referrals to social services, or reports of abuse. Most states have abuse reporting requirements. Usually it's a 24-hour verbal report and a 48-hour written report of any suspected abuse. You don't have to prove it, you just have to suspect it. So our chapter review talks about the major components of your radio reports. A little bit more information on your patient care reports. Remember that these are a legal document and may be called into court. Data can be used to make all kinds of changes in EMS. Right now we're talking about whether or not spinal mobilization is really all that necessary, and a lot of that information is coming from patient care reports and charts from agencies. So your report has to paint that picture of the patient and their condition accurately by describing everything that will happen throughout the call. Emergency medical communication comes in a lot of forms, and it's essential to team-based patient care. And your medical radio report is a structured interaction that gives the pertinent facts, knowing that you're going to give more detail if necessary, and much more detail once you get to the hospital. That proper verbal report includes the various items. Interpersonal communication is often a big challenge. Remember, work on your communication skills. If you see the way somebody interviews a patient or somebody gives a radio report and you like it, adopt it or steal from it, adapt from it. Confidentiality, refusals, falsifications of record, very important legal concepts when you're documenting a call. You need to know what your local policies are on that. So things for you to consider. How can you improve your interpersonal communication? What are objective and subjective information in your narrative portion of your PCR? All right. So critical thinking. Allow you guys to read through this list here to organize this information. Usually the things that you need to do when you're going to do something like this, a lot of places will have some sort of a form that they'll quickly fill in, but really you want to group the things together that are similar. So history together, treatments together, assessment findings together, scene information together, and then usually end with an ETA.